Jumanji: The Next Level is the sequel to the surprise hit that was Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, which was of course a reimagining of the original film that came out in 1995. Not exactly a remake, but it is kind of a sequel. And in this film, after the group of friends from the last movie destroyed the game, Spencer got it back and rebuilt it, and he has entered the game once again. So now the friends have to go back in to rescue him. Only problem is they weren't able to pick their characters beforehand, so now they are all switched up, and also two newcomers played by Danny Glover and Danny DeVito playing Grandpa Eddie and Milo Walker have entered, and they are now playing Dr. Smolder Bravestone and Moose Finbar. So of course wacky shenanigans ensue and exciting action sequences all set in this video game world. When I originally saw Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, I was actually really surprised by it because I went in not really expecting all that much, but it was a lot of fun. I thought it was a decent time, and because of how entertaining it was, I have since rewatched it quite a few times to the point where it bumped up from a B- to like a B grade. I actually do really enjoy watching that film. It's a very entertaining one, so the fact that they were making a sequel, it seemed like a really good idea because it made a ton of money, that first movie. Also because it had the majority of the same creative team coming back, and from the end of that first movie, I thought it seemed like it was going to be going in a pretty cool direction, especially when that first trailer came out with the great Tommy Edwards song. It was like, this is the perfect song to play with this trailer, and promised in that trailer it seemed like they were going to be building more on these characters that we grew to love in that first movie. So I was really excited to see this, actually. I was really hyped up to see it, and I walked out thinking about how I felt about the first movie walking out of that one. It was a decent, fun time with some pretty exciting action sequences and some pretty funny moments with our cast of characters. The two newcomers, Danny DeVito and Danny Glover, obviously are legendary actors, so when these characters start interacting and you see what they're setting up, you're obviously instantly kind of engaged with it. They're funny together, they have a great chemistry with each other, but then when their personalities are transferred to the avatars played by Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart, it just kind of continues and you don't really question it like, well, I was buying it before when it was the other actors, but now it's these guys, I don't really care. I instantly just cared for them because their impressions are actually pretty good, and it gets you linked up with them even more. Dwayne Johnson does a really good Danny DeVito in this movie, and it helps that Danny DeVito has that kind of personality that lends to pretty witty lines, pretty aggravated old man lines, and then Kevin Hart is the sweet older man that Danny Glover was in the beginning part, and Kevin Hart almost really steals this movie for a lot of it because there's just so many moments where he comes in, and it could be one of those things where if handled incorrectly, it could become really annoying and just kind of like just tiresome. But every time he comes in, I was like, I'm so happy that Kevin Hart got the Danny Glover personality because he is so funny because he has to talk like really slow and he's got to carry all these old man mannerisms that I thought he pulled off very well. And of course, Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart have natural chemistry with each other, as we've seen in the last Jumanji movie, and also Central Intelligence. They love working together. So when they have to carry over this subplot involving these two characters, I thought it still worked really well, and they were some of my favorite characters in the movie, these two. Karen Gillan still plays the character really well here. She has to kind of try to maintain order since everyone else is mixed around, and she's the only one that got the same character from the last one, so I thought she did a really good job here. Jack Black doing a Kevin Hart impersonation was pretty good. Like, he took his like over-exaggerated kind of mannerisms and brought it a lot to the performance, which I thought still worked. Once again, it's one of those things that if handled incorrectly could be really annoying, but Jack Black pulls it off really well. It's very similar to how he really almost stole the show in the first movie when he was impersonating Madison Eisman. And although I wouldn't say he nearly stole the show in this one, because I'd say that is kind of reserved to Kevin Hart for this movie, he still is able to pull off that kind of performance where he's switching that personality trait very well. Awkwafina, who is a newcomer in this movie, I won't talk too much about her because it gets a little spoilery there, and the trailers actually did a good job. Despite them showing a little bit too much near the end of the other trailer, they did a pretty good job of kind of shrouding some of the stuff that happens here. And Awkwafina, I thought, did a really good job in this movie for what she had to do. I was really impressed with her performance because a lot of these characters you may think going in, I know exactly what they're going to do because I saw them in the trailer, but it doesn't exactly play out in certain ways as you'd expect, so that's all I can really say. But I thought everyone did a really good job for what they had to do, because at times it could be seen as maybe daunting, like if I get this wrong I could really mess up the flow of the movie. I don't think anyone did that, and I thought the cast did another great job. So of course that really does help with the majority of the humor. Similar to the first movie, not every joke lands, but it's kind of hard to expect that with a lot of studio movies these days. Not every joke is going to land, and that's just kind of a thing for every person. Whenever you watch like a comedy special or a comedy movie, if it's a really great movie or a comedy special, then you'll probably laugh at everything, but sometimes certain jokes just won't hit. So it's just kind of a natural thing here, but it is still something that kind of, when a clunker kind of joke hit, you're kind of like, let's just move on. Another thing problem-wise that carried over from the last one was the uninteresting villain. This one, I'd say, is a little bit more memorable than Bobby Cannavale is in the first movie, but Still, same kind of idea. They're somewhat tied to the Avatar, Smolder Bravestone character, even though that barely gets explored because that's just the Avatar and the real people from the real world are the ones we're focusing on. So the villain just, I didn't really feel anything. And it almost seemed like they were trying to set it up to be a better villain than Russell Van Pelt. If I think that was the name in the first movie, by something he said earlier, and I was like, okay, if this goes anywhere special, then it could probably be excused, and it really kind of doesn't. It kind of goes down the way you'd kind of expect, which was a little disappointing from the villain's standpoint. As far as other disappointing things about this movie goes, I thought going into the movie that the game was, like, still busted, like they managed to fix it to the point where they could get in and play it, but there was going to be, like, technical glitches throughout, and that's why they had problems picking their characters. But really, it seemed like they really missed that opportunity to have more fun things like that throughout the movie. They have the Avatar mix-up beforehand, and then after that, it just doesn't really seem like there's any other problems technically with the game. And it kind of reminded me, once again, of another problem that happened in the first movie, where they kind of poked fun at certain video game tropes, but then after, like, the beginning part of it, they just kind of dropped it all together, and they were just in the adventure. And I thought they should have done a little bit more of that in the first movie. And this one, I wish they kind of amped up the fact that the game is different and it's a little glitchy and messed up. Because the structure of this movie, though they do a lot of new things, you go to a lot of new locations that I thought were really clever. There's a lot of fun action sequences that they have that change it up from the first movie's pace, and I thought those were really good. There's one in particular involving these mandrills and these bridges that was really clever and really well done. There's a lot of fun action in this movie, but at the end of the day, the structure of the story is about the same as the first movies. And I thought adding in like a technical glitch aspect would have made it a little bit more unpredictable. But since they don't amp that up a little bit more, you kind of become a little bit more aware of how this movie is structured and kind of where it's gonna go, save for like specific details. As I mentioned earlier in the video, the trailers really did hint at this movie being mostly about Spencer. Again, he was the lead in the last movie, but this one, once again, because of some inner character stuff that they actually hinted at the end of Welcome to the Jungle. So I was like, I'm all in for that, and I thought they handled his character arc pretty well, pretty solidly, not perfect. But if I were to talk about like what I would have done, it's basically me just kind of making my own movie as opposed to what they did here, which was still good, so I'm not going to mention anything about that. I thought his arc was handled solidly. And Danny DeVito and Danny Glover's arcs were handled pretty well too. Other than those characters, the other ones, though they're fun to see again, like you grew to love them in the other ones, so seeing them again, it's like, yes, it's great to see you, and they progress the plot forward with their humor and their interactions with each other, so I was like, it's not that I don't like seeing them, and it's not that I never want to see them again, far from it. It's just that they very obviously aren't the highlights of this movie. And one thing that I found really special about Welcome to the Jungle was that everyone had an arc to get through, and you felt with every character their arc completing, and now they're changed people. In this one, they don't really have that as much. Fridge is just Fridge, and Martha's just Martha. She's kind of tied to the Spencer thing, but she's not the one that needs to do the overall character change. And Bethany is also there to be Bethany. They also bring back someone from the last movie that I was like, I feel like there should be a little bit more like character drama tension-ish here because of some things you hinted at the end of that first movie. But it's kind of not. And also how they integrate them back into the story later is just way too convenient and too rushed through. I know it seems like I'm really dogging on this movie, but really I do not dislike it at all. As I mentioned, I found this movie really entertaining. All the actors still did a really great job playing these characters. I enjoy seeing these characters once again, and I thought they did a really great job, although they had the same story structure of adding in new elements that umped up the excitement. And production-wise, I thought this movie did a really great job with what they had to do. Similar to the first movie, the visual effects are about on point with that one. Not amazing, not like the greatest visual effects I've ever seen, but like good visual effects. I feel like I complained about the visual effects in the first movie in my first video, but honestly, rewatching that first movie multiple times, honestly, I guess I just don't feel as negatively towards them as I do now. And in this movie, it's kind of the same thing. Like, you can tell it's a special effect, but they don't look bad per se. The only reason I wanted to emphasize those negatives that I had with this film was because I did go into this with a lot more expectations than the first one, and I prefer the first one walking out of this movie, so there is some disappointment here. But then again, after giving the first movie a B- in that original video, I've rewatched that many times because of how fun it was, and I've bumped it up to a B. So maybe that can happen again. It happens with a bunch of movies for some people, whether it's grades going down or grades going up. This could be the same thing here. but right now, after walking out of the theater literally like an hour ago, this is just kind of how I'm feeling. It's a very fun movie. I do think it had some missed opportunities though, and I think certain character arcs could have been added to make this movie a lot more stronger and made the movie a little bit more touching and emotional, because they really do go there later in the movie with certain things. It's not like a Marriage Story or Toy Story 4 tearjerker kind of thing, but it is something that will touch your heart, and it's like, that's a really great message. And I think if they just added in more character stuff for everyone else, it would have been a lot stronger. I'm gonna give Jumanji: The Next Level a B-. I still had fun with this movie. The cast is all great. Everyone does a really great job with the performances they have to do, doing the new things that maybe could seem daunting for an actor at first. Jake Kasdan, I still think, directed this movie fairly well, and it is still very entertaining, and there's a lot of funny jokes. There are still some jokes that don't land, a disappointing villain, some disappointing things that don't really get added, some things that just kind of get breezed over just for the sake of plot convenience later. But overall, it is a really fun movie that I honestly could see myself watching again, but it's still not as good as Welcome to the Jungle, and it's definitely not as good as the Robin Williams movie. That is still a classic. But if you've seen Jumanji: The Next Level, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.